All right. Good morning. And if you're with me already, I'm going to need you to bear with me for just a second. I've got some IT issues going on, and it looks like YouTube is okay. Never mind. That is all sorted. All right. Good morning. So, chapter 18. I haven't read it yet, but it seems to be incredibly short. So, what I'm going to do is do chapter 18 and then plow right through into chapter 19, and then I'll post them later as separate videos with separate uh, chapter numbers. So, I hope everybody's having a lovely day. Welcome back. And let's get on with Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. It took a few seconds for the absurdity of this statement to sink in. Then Ron voiced what Harry was thinking. "You're both mental." "Ridiculous," said Hermione faintly. "Peter Pettigrew's dead," said Harry. "He killed him 12 years ago." He pointed at Black, whose face twitched convulsively. "I meant to," he growled, his yellow teeth bared. "But little Potter got the better of me. Not this time, though." And Crookshanks was thrown to the floor as Black lunged at Scabbers. Ron yelled with pain as Black's weight fell on his broken leg. "Sirius, no!" Lupin yelled, launching himself forwards and dragging Black away from Ron again. "Wait, you can't do it just like that. They need to understand. We've got to explain." "We can explain afterwards," snarled Black, trying to throw Lupin off, one hand still clawing the air as it tried to reach Scabbers, who was squealing like a piglet, scratching Ron's face and neck as he tried to escape. "They've got a right to know everything," Lupin panted, still trying to restrain Black. "Ron's kept him as a pet. There are parts of it even I don't understand. And Harry, you owe Harry the truth, Sirius." Black stopped struggling, though his hollowed eyes were still fixed on Scabbers, who was clamped tightly under Ron's bitten, scratched, and bleeding hands. "All right, then," Black said, without taking his eyes off the rat. "Tell them whatever you like. But make it quick, Remus. I want to commit the murder I was imprisoned for." Peter Pettigrew not really being very super appreciative here. He is all about tearing Ron up to escape. Dude's got no loyalty for being sheltered in the Weasley family for years. But loyalty's not really his thing, is it? "Good morning, Katie. Hi, how you doing?" "You're nutters, both of you," said Ron shakily, looking around at Harry and Hermione for support. "I've had enough of this. I'm off." He tried to heave himself up on his good leg, but Lupin raised his wand again, pointing it at Scabbers. "You're going to hear me out, Ron," he said quietly. "Just keep a tight hold on Peter while you listen." "He's not Peter, he's Scabbers," Ron yelled, trying to force the rat back into his front pocket. But Scabbers was fighting too hard. Ron swayed and overbalanced, and Harry caught him and pushed him back down to the bed. Then, ignoring Black, Harry turned to Lupin. "There were witnesses who saw Pettigrew die," he said. "A whole street full of them." "They didn't see what they thought they saw," said Black savagely, still watching Scabbers struggling in Ron's hands. Excuse me. "Everyone thought Sirius killed Peter," said Lupin, nodding. "I believed it myself, until I saw the map tonight, because the Marauder's map never lies. Peter's alive. Ron's holding him, Harry." Harry looked down at Ron, and as their eyes met, they agreed silently. Black and Lupin were both out of their minds. Their story made no sense whatsoever. How could Scabbers be Peter Pettigrew? Azkaban must have unhinged Black after all, but why was Lupin playing along with him? Great question for Harry to be asking himself. Then Hermione spoke in a trembling would-be calm sort of voice, as though trying to will Professor Lupin to talk sensibly. "But Professor Lupin, Scabbers can't be Pettigrew. It just can't be true. You know it can't." "Why can't it be true?" Lupin said calmly, as though they were in class and Hermione had simply spotted a problem in an experiment with Grindylows. Because because people would know if Peter Pettigrew had been an animagus. Because people would know if Peter Pettigrew had been an animagus. We did magi. We did animagi in class with Professor McGonagall, and I looked them up when I did my homework. The ministry keeps tabs on witches and wizards who can become animals. There's a register showing what animal they become and their markings and things. And I went and looked Professor McGonagall up on the register, and there have only been 7 animagi this century, and Pettigrew's name wasn't on the list. All right, I'm going to take a sip of coffee and check out the messages here. Yeah. So, yeah, excellent point. Ron's got this broken leg, and he's still trying to save this rat. Loyalty is his thing. If you get Ron to turn on you, you've probably burnt that bridge. Well, I guess we'll learn more about that later in the books, huh? Harry barely had time to marvel inwardly at the effort Hermione put into her homework when Lupin started to laugh. Right again, Hermione, he said. But the ministry never knew that there used to be 3 unregistered animagi running around Hogwarts. If you're going to tell them the story, get a move on, Remus, snarled Black, who was still watching Scabbers' every desperate move. I've waited 12 years. I'm not going to wait much longer. Yeah. Well, Hermione, she's still with it with the authority. She still respects authority and believes that it could be fair and not capricious. She has trust in the system still. There we go. I've waited 12 years. I'm not going to wait much longer. All right, but you'll need to help me, Sirius, said Lupin. I only know how it began. Lupin broke off. There had been a loud creak behind them. The bedroom door had opened of its own accord. All 5 of them stared at it. Then Lupin strode towards it and looked out into the landing. No one there. This place is haunted, said Ron. It's not, said Lupin, still looking at the door in a puzzled way. The Shrieking Shack was never haunted. The screams and howls the villagers used to hear were made by me. He pushed his graying hair out of his eyes, thought for a moment, then said, That's where all of this starts, with my becoming a werewolf. None of this could have happened if I hadn't been bitten, and if I hadn't been so foolhardy. He looked sober and tired. Ron started to interrupt, but Hermione said, Shh. She was watching Lupin very intently. I was a very small boy when I received the bite. My parents tried everything, but in those days, there was no cure. The potion that Professor Snape has been making for me is a very recent discovery. It makes me safe, you see. As long as I take it in the week preceding the full moon, I keep my mind when I transform. I am able to curl up in my office, a harmless wolf, and wait for the moon to wane again. Before the wolfsbane potion was discovered, however, I became a fully fledged monster once a month. It seems impossible I would be able to come to Hogwarts. Other parents weren't likely to want their children exposed to me. But then Dumbledore became headmaster and he was sympathetic. He said that as long as we took certain precautions, there was no reason I shouldn't come to school. Lupin sighed and looked directly at Harry. I told you, months ago, that the Whomping Willow was planted the year I came to Hogwarts. The truth is that it was planted because I had come to Hogwarts. This house, Lupin looked miserably around the room, the tunnel that leads to it, they were built for my use. Once a month I was smuggled out of the castle into this place to transform. The tree was placed at the tunnel mouth to stop anyone coming across me while I was dangerous. Harry couldn't see where this story was going, but he was listening raptly all the same. The only sound apart from Lupin's voice was Scabbers' frightened squeaking. Well, I don't know where this story is going either, but if we try to put ourselves in Lupin's place for this story, he grew up not trusting himself, not being trusted, and deliberately isolated on a regular basis. I've always wondered, and this is a rhetorical question, just food for thought. I've always wondered if the werewolf myths were some sort of way of projecting shame and fear about menstrual cycles. Anyways, my transformations in those days were terrible. It is very painful to turn into a werewolf. I was separated from humans to bite, so I bit and scratched myself instead. The villagers heard the noise and the screaming and thought they were hearing a particularly violent spirits. Dumbledore encouraged the rumor. Even now, when the house has been silent for years, the villagers don't dare approach it. But apart from my transformations, I was never happier than I had ever been in my life. For the first time ever, I had friends. 3 great friends. Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and of course, your father, Harry, James Potter. Now, my 3 friends could hardly fail to notice that I disappeared once a month. I made up all sorts of stories. I told them my mother was ill, and that I had to go home to see her. I was terrified they would desert me the moment they found out what I was. But of course, they, like you, Hermione, worked out the truth. And they didn't desert me at all. Instead, they did something for me that would make my transformations not only bearable, but the best times of my life. They became animagia. My dad, too? Said Harry, astounded. Yes, indeed, said Lupin. It took them the best part of 3 years to work out how to do it. Your father and Sirius here were the cleverest students in the school, and lucky they were, because the animagus transformation can go horribly wrong. One reason the ministry keeps a close watch on those attempting to do it. Peter needed all the help he could get from James and Sirius. Finally, in our 5th year, they managed it. They could turn each other into a different animal at will. But how did that help you? Said Hermione, sounding puzzled. And let's check our messages. See what interesting things we have to say. Yeah. He has had to live with that shame and the isolation and the disappearance, and he's never been, allowed to tell or share. It's a secret that he carries. It's a secret he's alone in, and he's always alone in it. I mean, a lot of people think that they're flawed, but Lupin has something he can look at every month, whether he wants to or not, and says, "Oh, there is definitely something different about me that is dangerous and harmful." That's going to be hard to reconcile. How do you sit with that when you're really just a kind, empathetic person? They couldn't keep me company as humans, so they kept me company as animals, said Lupin. A werewolf is only a danger to people. They sneaked out of the castle every month under James's invisibility cloak. They transformed. Peter, as the smallest, could slip beneath the willow's attacking branches and touch the knot that freezes it. They would then slip down the tunnel and join me. Under their influence, I became less dangerous. My body was still wolfish, but my mind seemed to become less so while I was with them. Hurry up, Remus, snarled Black. Good morning. Hurry up, Remus, snarled Black, who was still watching Scabbers with a horrible sort of hunger in his face. I'm getting there, Sirius. I'm getting there. Well, hey, highly exciting possibilities were open to us now. We could all transform. So we were leaving the shrieking shack and roaming the school grounds in the village by night. Sirius and James transformed into such large animals they were able to keep a werewolf in check. I doubt whether any Hogwarts students ever found out more about the Hogwarts grounds and Hogsmeade than we did. And that's how we came to write the Marauders map and sign it with our nicknames. Sirius is Padfoot, Peter is Wormtail, James was Prongs. What sort of animal? Harry began, but Hermione cut across him. That was still really dangerous. Running around in the dark with a werewolf? What if you've given the others the slip and bitten somebody? A thought that still haunts me, said Lupin heavily. And there were near misses, many of them. We laughed about them afterwards. We were young, thoughtless, carried away with our own cleverness. I sometimes felt guilty about betraying Dumbledore's trust, of course. He had admitted me to Hogwarts when no other headmaster would have done so, and he had no idea I was breaking the rules he had set down for my own and others' safety. He never knew I had led 3 fellow students into becoming animagi illegally. But I always managed to forget my guilty feelings every time we sat down to plan our next month's adventure, and I haven't changed. Well, you're not going to change if you forget your guilty thoughts. Lupin's face had hardened, and there was self-disgust in his voice. Lupin's got some shame work he needs to do. Lupin's voice had hardened, and there was self-disgust in his voice. All this year, I've been battling with myself, wondering whether I should tell Dumbledore that Sirius is an animagus. But I didn't do it. Why? Because I was too cowardly. It would have meant admitting that I'd betrayed his trust while I was at school, admitting that I'd led others along with me. And Dumbledore's trust has meant everything to me. He let me into Hogwarts as a boy, and he gave me a job, and when I have been shunned all my adult life, unable to find paid work because of what I am. And so I convinced myself that Sirius was getting into the school using dark arts he learned from Voldemort, and that being an animagus had nothing to do with it. So, in a way, Snape's been right about me all along. Pause. Lupin, thus far throughout this whole book, has been holding emotional containment for everybody else. My man just went through a shame spiral, and he lost it. He lost the plot. He lost his emotional containment, and he just shame spiraled all over the whole room. Now he needs help. Now let's check our messages. Oh, yeah. I mean, think about that. He said it like it was nothing, but the screams and howls and banging of him terrorizing his own flesh still scares the villagers. Nothing about that says he didn't feel it. He was screaming for a reason. Snape, said Black harshly, taking his eyes off Scabbers for the first time in minutes and looking up at Lupin. What's Snape's got to do with it? He's here, Sirius, said Lupin heavily. He's teaching here as well. He looked up at Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Professor Snape was at school with us. He fought very hard against my appointment to the defense against the dark arts job. He has been telling Dumbledore all year that I am not to be trusted. He has his reasons. You see, Sirius here played a trick on him, which nearly killed him. A trick which involved me. Black made a derisive noise. It served him right, he sneered, sneaking around, trying to find out what we were up to, hoping he could get us expelled. Severus was very interested in where I went every month, Lupin told Harry, Ron, and Hermione. We were in the same year, you know, and we, didn't like each other very much. He especially disliked James. Jealous, I think. He especially disliked James. Jealous, I think, of James's talent on the Quidditch pitch. Anyway, Snape had seen me crossing the grounds with Madame Pomfrey one evening as she led me towards the Whomping Willow to transform. Sirius thought it would be, amusing to tell Snape all he had to do was prod the knot on the tree trunk with a long stick, and he'd be able to get in after me. Well, of course, Snape tried it, and if he'd got as far as this house, he'd have met a fully grown werewolf. But your father, who'd heard what Sirius had done, went after Snape and pulled him back at great risk to his life. Snape glimpsed me, though, at the end of the tunnel. He was forbidden to tell anyone by Dumbledore, but from that time on, he knew what I was. So that's why Snape doesn't like you, Harry said slowly, because he thought you were in on the joke? That's right, sneered a cold voice from the wall behind Lupin. Severus Snape was pulling off the invisibility cloak, his wand pointing directly at Lupin. Now, this is the part where I normally say, thus concludes chapter 18. See you guys soon. But in this case, as we're only 20 minutes into this live, I'm going to have a sip of coffee. I'm going to look at my comments, and then we'll move on and do the Servant of Lord Voldemort. So 1 second. Excellent. And this will be recut as 319A and posted at some point. Chapter 19. The Servant of Lord Voldemort. Hermione screamed. Black leapt to his feet. Harry jumped as though he'd received a huge electric shot. I found this at the base of the Whomping Willow, said Snape, throwing the cloak aside, careful to keep his wand pointing directly at Lupin's chest. Very useful, Potter. I thank you. Snape was slightly breathless, but his face was full of suppressed triumph. You're wondering, perhaps, how I knew you were here, he said, his eyes glittering. I've just been to your office, Lupin. You forgot to take your potion tonight, so I took a goblet full along. And very lucky I did. Lucky for me, I mean. Lying on your desk was a certain map. One glance at it told me all I needed to know. I saw you running along this passageway and out of sight. Severus, Lupin began, but Snape overrode him. I've told the headmaster again and again that you've been helping your old friend Black into the castle, Lupin, and here's the proof. Not even I dreamed you would have had the nerve to use this old place as your hideout. Severus, you're making a mistake, said Lupin urgently. You haven't heard everything. I can explain. Sirius is not here to kill Harry. 2 more for Azkaban tonight, said Snape, his eyes now gleaming fanatically. I shall be interested to see how Dumbledore takes this. He was quite convinced you were harmless, you know, Lupin, a tame werewolf. You fool, said Lupin softly. Is a schoolboy grudge worth putting an innocent man back inside Azkaban? Bang! Thin, snake-like cords burst from the end of Snape's wand and twisted themselves around Lupin's mouth, wrists, and ankles. He was overbalanced and fell to the floor, unable to move. With a roar of rage, Black started towards Snape, but Snape pointed his wand straight between Black's eyes. Give me a reason, he whispered. Give me a reason to do it, and I swear I will. Black stopped dead. It would have been impossible to say which face showed more hatred. Harry stood there paralyzed, not knowing what to do or who to believe. He glanced around at Ron and Hermione. Ron looked just as confused as he did, still fighting to keep hold of the struggling scabbers. Hermione, however, took an uncertain step towards Snape and said, in a very breathless voice, Professor Snape, it wouldn't hurt to hear what they've got to say, would it? Miss Granger, you are already facing suspension from this school, Snape spat. You, Potter, and Weasley are out of bounds in the company of a convicted murderer and a werewolf. For once in your life, hold your tongue. But if there was a mistake... Keep quiet, you stupid girl, Snape shouted, looking suddenly quite deranged. Don't talk about what you don't understand. A few sparks shot out of the end of his wand, which was still pointing at Black's face. Hermione fell silent. Vengeance is very sweet, Snape breathed at Black. How I hoped I would be the one to catch you. The joke's on you again, Severus, snarled Black, as long as this boy brings his rat up to the castle. He jerked his head at Ron. I'll come quietly. Up to the castle, said Snape sulkily. I don't think we need to go that far. All I have to do is call the Dementors once we get out of the willow. They'll be very pleased to see you, Black. Pleased enough to give you a little kiss, I dare say. What little color there was in Black's face left it. You've got to hear me out, he croaked. The rat. Look at the rat. But there was a mad glint in Snape's eyes that Harry had never seen before. He seemed beyond reason. Come on, all of you, he said. He clicked his fingers, and the ends of the cords that bound Lupin flew into his hands. I'll drag the werewolf. Perhaps the Dementors will have a kiss for him, too. Before he knew what he was doing, Harry had crossed the room in 3 strides and blocked the door. Coffee and message break. Yeah. I mean, that is a powerful item, and it's a heirloom from his father, and he just leaves the thing laying around all over the place. It is kind of realistic, though, because, I mean, kids in schools and coats, it's kind of a thing. Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we can understand his pain. We can understand Snape's pain without agreeing with his choices. And just because you hurt something, if you're doing stuff about it 30 years later that are not good, that means you probably should have like gone to get some therapy or, had an eat, pray, love moment or something, because something in Snape's life didn't work. And when he became an adult, it was on him to fix it. Where was I? Yes, there we go. Get out of the way, Potter. You're in enough trouble already, snarled Snape. If I hadn't been here to save your skin. Professor Lupin could have killed me about 100 times this year, Harry said. I've been alone with him loads of times, having defense lessons against the Dementors. If he was helping Black, why didn't he just finish me off then? Don't ask me to fathom the way a werewolf's mind works, hissed Snape. Get out of the way, Potter. You're pathetic, Harry yelled. Just because they made a fool of you at school, why won't you even listen? Silence! I will not be spoken to like that, Snape shrieked, looking madder than ever. Like father, like son, Potter. I have just saved your neck. You should be thanking me on bended knee. You would have been well served if he'd killed you. You'd have died like your father, too arrogant to believe you might be mistaken in Black. Now get out of the way or I will make you. Get out of the way, Potter. Harry made up his mind in a split second. Before Snape could take even one step towards him, he had raised his wand. Yeah, absolutely. He keeps it all bottled up inside and then he unleashes it when his anxiety is the highest on people he thinks deserves it. Absolutely. Good call, Katie. Where were we? Expelliarmus, he yelled, except that his wasn't the only voice that shouted. There was a blast that made the door rattle on its hinges. Snape was lifted off his feet and slammed into the wall, then slid down then did then slid down it to the floor, a trickle of blood oozing from under his hair. He had been knocked out. Harry looked around. Both Ron and Hermione had tried to disarm Snape at exactly the same moment. Snape's wand soared in a high arc and landed on the bed next to Crookshanks. You shouldn't have done that, said Black, looking at Harry. You should have left him to me. Harry avoided Black's eyes. He wasn't sure, even now, that he'd done the right thing. We attacked a teacher. We attacked a teacher. Hermione whimpered, staring at the lifeless Snape with frightened eyes. Oh, we're going to be in so much trouble. Lupin was struggling against his bonds. Black bent down, page turn. Now, if Hermione is this freaked out by going against incorrect authority, imagine how much more she would be freaked out if she hadn't already test run this by pushing back on Trelawney's class. She'd be way more freaked out if she hadn't done that. Yeah, teamwork. Quickly and untied him. Lupin straightened up, rubbing his arms where the ropes had cut into them. Thank you, Harry, he said. I'm still not saying I believe you, Harry retorted. Then it's time we offered you some proof, said Black. You, boy, give me Peter, now. Ron clutched Scabbers closer to his chest. Come off it, he said weakly. Are you trying to say you broke out of Azkaban just to get your hand on Scabbers? I mean, he looked up at Harry and Hermione for support. Okay, say Pettigrew could turn into a rat. There are millions of rats. How's he supposed to know which one he's after if he was locked up in Azkaban? You know, Sirius, that's a fair question, said Lupin, turning to Black and frowning slightly. How did you find out where he was? Black put one of his claw-like hands inside his robes and took out a crumpled piece of paper, which he smoothed flat and held out to show the others. It was the photograph of Ron and his family that had appeared in the Daily Prophet the previous summer, and there, on Ron's shoulder, was Scabbers. How did you get this? Lupin asked Black, thunderstruck. Fudge, said Black. When he came to inspect Azkaban last year, he gave me his paper, and there was Peter, on the front page, on this boy's shoulder. I knew him at once. How many times had I seen him transform? And the caption said the boy would be going back to Hogwarts, to where Harry was. My God, said Lupin softly, staring from Scabbers to the picture in the paper and back again. His front paw. What about it? Said Ron defiantly. He's got a toe missing, said Black. Of course, Lupin breathed. So simple. So brilliant. He cut it off himself. Just before he transformed, said Black. When I cornered him, he yelled for the whole street to hear that I'd betrayed Lily and James. Then, before I could curse him, he blew apart the street with the wand behind his back, killed everyone within 20 feet of himself, and sped down into the sewer with the other rats. Didn't you ever hear, Ron? Said Lupin. The biggest bit of Peter they found was his finger. Look, Scabbers probably had a fight with another rat or something. He's been in my family for ages, right? 12 years, in fact, said Lupin. Didn't you ever wonder why he was living so long? We've been taking good care of him, said Ron. Not looking too good at the moment, though, is he? Said Lupin. I'd guess he's been losing weight ever since he heard Sirius was on the loose again. Yeah. He's been scared of that mad cat, said Ron, nodding towards Crookshanks, who was still purring on the bed. But that wasn't right, Harry thought suddenly. Scabbers had been looking ill before he met Crookshanks. Ever since Ron's return from Egypt, since the time when Black had escaped. This cat isn't mad, said Black hoarsely. He reached out a bony hand and stroked Crookshanks' fluffy head. He's the most intelligent of his kind I've ever met. He recognized Peter for what he was straight away. And when he met me, he knew I was no dog. It was a while before he trusted me. Finally, I managed to communicate to him what I was after, and he's been helping me. What do you mean? Breathed Hermione. He tried to bring Peter to me, but couldn't. So he stole the passwords into Gryffindor Tower from me. As I understand it, he took them from a boy's bedside table. Harry's brain seemed to be sagging under the weight of what he was hearing. It was absurd, and yet... Good morning. Welcome, new viewers. It was absurd, and yet... But Peter got wind of what was going on and ran for it. This cat, Crookshanks, did you call him, told me Peter had left blood on the sheets. I suppose he bit himself. Well, faking his own death had worked once. These words jolted Harry to his senses. And why did he fake his death? He said furiously. Because he knew you were about to kill him like you killed my parents. No, said Lupin. Harry. And now you've come to finish him off. Yes, I have, said Black, with an evil look at Scabbers. Then I should have let Snape... Then I should have let Snape take you, Harry shouted. Harry, said Lupin hurriedly, don't you see? All this time we've thought Sirius betrayed your parents, and Peter tracked him down, but it was the other way around, don't you see? Peter betrayed your mother and father. Sirius tracked Peter down. That's not true, Harry yelled. He was their secret keeper. He said so before you turned up. He said he killed them. He was pointing at Black, who shook his head slowly. The sunken eyes were suddenly overbright. Harry, I as good as killed them, he croaked. I persuaded Lily and James to change to Peter at the last moment. Persuaded them to use him as secret keeper instead of me. I'm to blame. I know it. The night they died, I'd arranged to check on Peter, make sure he was still safe. But when I arrived at his hiding place, he'd gone. Yet there was no sign of a struggle. It didn't feel right, and I was scared. I set out for your parents' house straight away, and when I saw their house destroyed and their bodies, I realized what Peter must have done, what I'd done. His voice broke. He turned away. Enough of this, said Lupin, and there was a steely note in his voice Harry had never heard before. There's one certain way to prove what really happened. Ron, give me that rat. All right. I don't know where Lupin's at right now emotionally, but he's pulled something together and he's very determined now. Now we're into action for Lupin. What are you going to do with him if I give him to you? Ron asked Lupin tensely. Force him to show himself, said Lupin. If he really is a rat, it won't hurt him. Ron hesitated, then at long last held out Scabbers, and Lupin took him. Scabbers began to squeak without stopping, twisting and turning, his tiny black eyes bulging in his head. Ready, Sirius? Said Lupin. Black had already retrieved Snape's wand from the bed. He approached Lupin and the struggling rat, his wet eyes suddenly seeming to be burning in his face. Together, he said quietly. His wet eyes suddenly seemed to be burning in his face. So, dude broke out of Azkaban, and this second, right now, there is the hope that he can clear his name. This second is so important to Sirius, because then he won't be the bad guy to everybody, and somebody will believe him. Together, he said quietly. I think so, said Lupin, holding Scabbers tightly in one hand and his wand in the other. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. A flash of blue-white light erupted from both wands. For a moment, Scabbers was frozen in midair, his small black form twisting madly. Ron yelled. The rat fell and hit the floor. There was another blinding flash of light, and then it was like watching a speeded-up film of a growing tree. A head was shooting upwards from the ground. Limbs were sprouting. Next moment, a man was standing where Scabbers had been, cringing and wringing his hands. Crookshanks was spitting and snarling on the bed, the hair on his back standing up. Why, yes, Katie, this is a Marauders Map mug that reacts to heat that I'm enjoying my coffee from. And unfortunately, my coffee's getting a little cold, so you cannot see the map. And the only thing that I don't like about it is you can't put it in the dishwasher, which is very unfortunate. Yeah. I mean, he knows that if he had kept the secret with him, they would still be alive. We know that's not really his fault, but it's very clear that he's holding a lot of guilt about it. He was a very short man, hardly taller than Harry and Hermione. His thin, colorless hair was unkempt, and there was a large bald patch on top. He had the shrunken appearance of a plump man who had lost a lot of weight in a short time. His skin looked grubby, almost like Scabbers' fur, and something of the rat lingered around his pointed nose, his very small, watery eyes. He looked around at them all, his breathing fast and shallow. Harry saw his eyes dart to the door and back again. Why, hello, Peter, said Lupin pleasantly, as though rats frequently erupted into old school friends around him. Long time, no see. Yeah. Yeah, not only has he been feeling those emotions for 12 years with no way to vent to anybody, but nobody believes him. So he's had everybody pointing the finger at him. I mean, imagine if everyone knew you denounced you and you were innocent and they couldn't believe you and you couldn't tell. And you were being tortured the whole time. It's terrible. Serious. Remus. Even Pettigrew's voice was squeaky. Again, his eyes darted towards the door. My friends, my old friends. Black's wand arm rose, but Lupin seized him around the wrist, gave him a warning look, then turned again to Pettigrew, his voice light and casual. We've been having a little chat, Peter, about what happened the night Lily and James died. You might have missed the finer points while you were squeaking around down there on the bed. Remus, grasped Pettigrew, and Harry could see beads of sweat breaking out over his pasty face. You don't believe him, do you? He tried to kill me, Remus. So we've heard, said Lupin, more coldly. I'd like to clear up one or two little matters with you, Peter, if you'd be so. He's come to try and kill me again, Pettigrew shrieked suddenly, pointing at Black, and Harry saw that he used his middle finger because his index finger was missing. He killed Lily and James, and now he's going to kill me too. You've got to help me, Remus. Black's face looked more skull-like than ever as he stared at Pettigrew with his fathomless eyes. No one's going to try and kill you until we've sorted a few things out, said Lupin. Sorted things out? Squealed Pettigrew, looking wildly about him once more, eyes taking in the boarded windows and again the only door. I knew he'd come after me. I knew he'd be back for me. I've been waiting for this for 12 years. See, okay, so now I've got to ask Katie, on your 12 years comment, were we talking about Sirius or were we talking about Wormtail here? Because they've both been sitting with it for 12 years. You knew Sirius was going to break out of Azkaban, said Lupin, his brow furrowed, when nobody has ever done it before. He's got dark powers the rest of us can only dream of, Pettigrew shouted shrilly. How else did he get out of there? I suppose he who must not be named taught him a few tricks? Black started to laugh, a horrible, mirthless laugh that filled the whole room. Voldemort? Teach me tricks, he said. Pettigrew flinched, as though Black had brandished a whip at him. What, scared to hear your old master's name, said Black. I don't blame you, Peter. His lot aren't very happy with you, are they? I don't know what you mean, Sirius, muttered Pettigrew, his breathing faster than ever. His whole face was shining with sweat now. You haven't been hiding from me for 12 years, said Black. You've been hiding from Voldemort's old supporters. I heard things in Azkaban, Peter. They all think you're dead, or you'd have to answer to them. I've heard them screaming all sorts of things in their sleep. Sounds like they think the double-crosser double-crossed them. Voldemort went to the Potters on your information, and Voldemort met his downfall there. And not all Voldemort's supporters ended up in Azkaban, did they? There are still plenty out here, biding their time, pretending they've seen the error of their ways. And if they ever got wind that you were still alive, Peter? Don't know what you're talking about, said Pettigrew again, more shrilly than ever. He wiped his face on his sleeve and looked up at Lupin. You don't believe this madness, Remus. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Sirius has concerns about the impact of his choices on others. Peter has absolutely no concern about what happens to anybody but him. I must admit, Peter, I have difficulty in understanding why an innocent man would want to spend 12 years as a rat, said Lupin evenly. Innocent but scared, squealed Pettigrew. If Voldemort's supporters were after me, it was because I put one of their best men in Azkaban. The spy, Sirius Black. Black's face contorted. How dare you, he growled, sounding suddenly like the bear-sized dog he had been. I, a spy for Voldemort? When did I ever sneak around people who are stronger or more powerful than myself? But you, Peter, I'll never understand why I didn't see you were the spy from the start. You always liked big friends who'd look after you, didn't you? It used to be us, me and Remus, and James. Pettigrew wiped his face again. He was almost panting for breath. Me? A spy? Must be out of your mind. Never. Don't know how you could say such a... Lily and James only made you secret keeper because I suggested it, Black hissed, so venomously that Pettigrew took a step backwards. I thought it was the perfect plan, a bluff. Voldemort would be sure to come after me. Would never dream they'd use a weak, talentless thing like you. It must have been the finest moment of your miserable life telling Voldemort you could hand him the Potters. Sorry, checking the messages. Oh, yeah. I think he's absolutely been content as a rat. Yeah, snacks, living the easy life. Gets to hide whenever he wants. Pettigrew was muttering distractedly. Harry caught words like far-fetched and lunacy, but he couldn't help paying more attention to the ashen color of Pettigrew's face and the way his eyes continued to dart towards the windows and door. Professor Lupin, said Hermione timidly, can I say something? Certainly, Hermione, said Lupin courteously. Well, Scabbers, I mean this man, he's been sleeping in Harry's dormitory for 3 years. If he's working for you-know-who, how come he never tried to hurt Harry before now? There, said Pettigrew shrilly, pointing at Hermione with his maimed hand. Thank you. You see, Remus, I've never hurt a hair of Harry's head. Why should I? I'll tell you why, said Black, because you never did anything for anyone unless you could see what was in it for you. Voldemort's been hiding for 12 years. They say he's half dead. You weren't about to commit murder right under Albus Dumbledore's nose for a wreck of a wizard who'd lost all his power, were you? You'd want to be quite sure he was the biggest bully in the playground before you went back to him, wouldn't you? Why else did you find a wizard family to take you in? Keeping an ear out for news, weren't you, Peter? Just in case your old protector regained strength and it was safe to rejoin him? Pettigrew opened his mouth and closed it several times. Boom. Right there. Peter's glitched. That was the truth. He seemed to have lost the ability to talk. Mr. Black? Serious, said Hermione timidly. Black jumped at being addressed like this and stared at Hermione as though being spoken to politely was something he'd long forgotten. Probably has been. If you don't mind me asking, how did you get out of Azkaban if you didn't use dark magic? Thank you, gasped Pettigrew, nodding frantically at her. Exactly. Precisely what I... But Lupin silenced him with a look. Black was frowning slightly at Hermione, but not as though he was annoyed with her. He seemed to be pondering his answer. I don't know how he did it, he said slowly. I think the reason I never lost my mind is that I knew I was innocent. That wasn't a happy thought, so the Dementors couldn't suck it from me, but it kept me sane in knowing who I am. Helped me keep my powers. So when it all became too much, I could transform in my cell, become a dog. Dementors can't see, you know, he swallowed. They feel their way towards people by sensing their emotions. They could tell my feelings were less human, less complex when I was a dog. But they thought, of course, that I was losing my mind like everyone else in there. So it didn't trouble them. But I was weak, very weak, and I had no hope of driving them away from me without a wand. But then I saw Peter in that picture. I realized he was at Hogwarts with Harry, perfectly positioned to act. If one hint reached his ears that the dark side was gathering strength again, Pettigrew was shaking his head, mouthing noiselessly, but staring all the while at Black as though hypnotized, ready to strike the moment he could be sure of allies, to deliver the last Potter to them. If he gave them Harry, who dared say he'd betrayed Lord Voldemort? He'd be welcomed back with honors. So you see, I had to do something. I was the only one who knew Peter was still alive. Harry remembered what Mr. Weasley had told Mrs. Weasley. The guards say he's been talking in his sleep, always the same words. He's at Hogwarts. It was as if someone had lit a fire in my head and the Dementors couldn't destroy it. It wasn't a happy feeling. It was an obsession, but it gave me strength. It cleared my mind. So one night when they opened my door to bring food, I slipped past them as a dog. It's so much harder for them to sense animal emotions that they were confused. I was thin, very thin, thin enough to slip through the bars. I swam as a dog back to the mainland. I journeyed north and slipped into the Hogwarts grounds as a dog. I've been living in the forest ever since, except when I come to watch the Quidditch, of course. You fly as well as your father did, Harry. Whew. All right. I'm just going to ask for a second's forbearance while I process this one, because this is a chunk right here. So if we keep in keeping with the metaphor that Dementors function allegorically like a panic attack, the process that Sirius is describing here would be something similar to, I don't want to say like dissociation, but a sort of functional state change where there's perceptual narrowing and he still has some cognition and now he's objective base. This sort of mode is known in Survivors. And it's not dissimilar from him saying that in his mind and in his heart, he became as if he were an animal and he escaped like an animal. And there are plenty of stories of people who exist in the real world who have had to become like that psychologically to endure their tortures and escape from sometimes their real life prisons and confinements and things. So you could view this as a way of looking to what happens to people when they're tortured and manage to escape and how they do it. They have to change their mindsets to be able to survive. But enough digression. Where was I? There we go. He looked at Harry, who did not look away. Believe me, croaked Black. Believe me. I never betrayed James and Lily. I would have died before I betrayed them. And at long last, Harry believed him. Throat too tight to speak, he nodded. No. Pettigrew had fallen to his knees as though Harry's nod had been his own death sentence. He shuffled forward on his knees, groveling, his hands clasped in front of them as though praying. Sirius, it's me. It's Peter, your friend. You wouldn't. Black kicked out and Pettigrew recoiled. There's enough filth on my robes without you touching them, said Black. Remus, Pettigrew squeaked, turning to Lupin instead, writhing imploringly in front of him. You don't believe this? Wouldn't Sirius have told you they'd changed the plan? Not if you thought I was the spy, Peter, said Lupin. I assume that's why you didn't tell me, Sirius, he said casually over Pettigrew's head. Forgive me, Remus, said Black. Not at all, Padfoot, old friend, said Lupin, who was now rolling up his sleeves. And will you, in turn, forgive me for believing you were the spy? Of course, said Black, and a ghost of a grin flitted across his gaunt face. He, too, began rolling up his sleeves. Shall we kill him together? Yes, I think so, said Lupin grimly. Yeah. Innocence isn't a feeling. It is a factual state of being, not a feeling. Something he could anchor onto. Mm. Yes, I think so, said Lupin grimly. You wouldn't. You won't, gasped Pettigrew, and he scrambled around to Ron. Ron, haven't I been a good friend? A good pet? You won't let me kill them, Ron, will you? You're on my side, aren't you? But Ron was staring at Pettigrew with the utmost revulsion. I let you sleep in my bed, he said. Kind boy, kind master. Pettigrew crawled towards Ron. You won't let them do it. I was your rat. I was a good pet. If you made a better rat than human, it's not too much to boast about, Peter, said Black harshly. Ron, going still paler with pain, wrenched his broken leg out of Pettigrew's reach. Ron moved his broken leg so this thing wouldn't touch him. Pettigrew turned on his knees, staggered towards, and seized the hem of Hermione's robes. Sweet girl, clever girl, you won't let them. Help me. Hermione pulled her robes out of Pettigrew's clutching hands and backed away against the wall, looking horrified. Pettigrew knelt, trembling uncontrollably, and turned his head slowly towards Harry. Harry, you look just like your father, just like him. How dare you speak to Harry? Roared Black. How dare you face him? How dare you talk about James in front of him? Harry, whispered Pettigrew, shuffling towards him, hands outstretched. Harry, James wouldn't have wanted me killed. James would have understood, Harry. He would have shown me mercy. Both Black and Lupin strode forwards, seized Pettigrew's shoulders, and threw him backwards onto the floor. He sat there, twitching with terror, staring up at them. You sold Lily and James to Voldemort, said Black, who was shaking too. Don't you deny it? I'm sorry. Do you deny it? Right? If I was in Ron's shoes, that would weird me out for a long, long time, man. I would probably need something to help me get to go to sleep for fear that there's going to be some creepy old nine-fingered man hanging out in my bed. Pettigrew burst into tears. It was horrible to watch. He looked like an oversized, balding baby cowering on the floor. Sirius, what could I have done? The Dark Lord. You have no idea. He has weapons you can't imagine. I was scared, Sirius. I was never brave like you and Remus and James. I never meant it to happen. He who must not be named forced me. Don't lie, bellowed Black. You'd been passing information to him for a year before Lily and James died. You were his spy. He was taking over everywhere, gasped Pettigrew. What was there to be gained by refusing him? What was there to be gained by fighting the most evil wizard who has ever existed? Said Black with terrible fury in his face. Only innocent lives, Peter. You don't understand, whined Pettigrew. He would have killed me, Sirius. Then you should have died, roared Black. Died rather than betray your friends, as we would have done for you. Black and Lupin stood shoulder to shoulder, wands raised. You should have realized, said Lupin quietly, if Voldemort didn't kill you, we would. Goodbye, Peter. Hermione covered her face with her hands and turned to the wall. No, Harry yelled. He ran forwards, placing himself in front of Pettigrew, facing the wands. You can't kill him, he said breathlessly. You can't. Black and Lupin both looked staggered. Excuse me while I check some messages. Mm-hmm. That is a great question, Becca. I'm going to have to think about that one for a moment when I'm not doing the read. Maybe one of our other viewers could answer that. Black and Lupin both look staggered. Harry, this piece of vermin is the reason you have no parents, Black snarled. This cringing bit of filth would have seen you die too without turning a hair. You heard him. His own stinking skin meant more to him than your whole family. I know, Harry panted. We'll take him up to the castle. We'll hand him over to the Dementors. He can go to Azkaban. Just don't kill him. Harry, gasped Pettigrew, and he flung his arms around Harry's knees. Thank you. It's more than I deserve. Thank you. Get off me, Harry spat, throwing Pettigrew's hands off him in disgust. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I don't reckon my dad would have wanted his best friends to become killers. Just for you. No one moved or made a sound, except Pettigrew, whose breath was coming in wheezes as he clutched his chest. Black and Lupin were looking at each other. Then, with one movement, they lowered their wands. You're the only person who has the right to decide, Harry, said Black. But think what he did. He can go to Azkaban, Harry repeated. If anyone deserves that place, he does. Pettigrew was still wheezing behind him. Very well, said Lupin. Stand aside, Harry. Harry hesitated. I'm going to tie him up, said Lupin. That's all, I swear. No, well, Fred and George really don't pay attention to much of anything that doesn't affect Fred and George. And if they do notice, it's just to make fun of it briefly and then move on. Yeah, exactly. Fred and George don't track other people and just find a way to get into the mischief that they want. Harry stepped out of the way. Thin cords shot from Lupin's wand this time, and next moment, Pettigrew was wriggling on the floor, bound and gagged. But if you transform, Peter, growled Black, his own wand pointing at Pettigrew too, we will kill you. You agree, Harry? Harry looked down at the pitiful figure on the floor and nodded so that Pettigrew could see him. Right, said Lupin, suddenly businesslike. Ron, I can't mend bones nearly as well as Madame Pomfrey, so I think it's best we just strap your leg up until we can get you to the hospital wing. He hurried over to Ron, bent down, tapped Ron's leg with his wand, and muttered, Ferula. Ferula. Bandages spun up Ron's leg, strapping it tightly to his splint. Lupin helped him to his feet. Ron put his weight gingerly on the leg and didn't wince. That's better, he said. Thanks. What about Professor Snape? Said Hermione in a small voice, looking down at Snape's prone figure. There's nothing seriously wrong with him, said Lupin, bending over Snape and checking his pulse. You were just a little overenthusiastic. Still out cold. Perhaps it'll be best if we don't revive him until we're safely back in the castle. We can take him like this. He muttered, mobile corpses, as though invisible strings were tied to Snape's wrists, neck, and knees, and he was pulled into a standing position, head still lolling unpleasantly, like a grotesque puppet. He hung a few inches above the ground, his limp feet dangling. Lupin picked up the invisibility cloak and tucked it safely into his pocket. And two of us should be chained to this, said Black, nudging Pettigrew with his toe, just to make sure. I'll do it, said Lupin. And me, said Ron savagely, limping forwards. Black conjured heavy manacles from thin air. Soon Pettigrew was upright again, left arm chained to Lupin's right arm to Ron's left. Ron's face was set. He seemed to have taken Scabbers' true identity as a personal insult. Well, sure. His pet defected. His pet was a traitor. His pet was a traitor to him and helped kill his friend's parents. Crookshanks leapt lightly off the bed and led the way out of the room. His bottle brush tail held jauntily high. Wow. If Lockhart had had any restraint, With his magic or his mouth, he would be in a completely different position. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. Went a little long today, but we got 2 chapters in. So join me this weekend for chapter 20, The Dementor's Kiss. It's been great having y'all. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and I'll see you soon.